Hi, good morning everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Nita. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Semoga semua selalu dalam keadaan sehat dan selalu dalam lindungan Ilahi Rabbi. In this chapter, I want to review about an education and how to setting DA in education. Chapter 5 is Dynamic Assessment in Educational Setting. Bagaimana menggunakan atau men-setting dynamic assessment di dalam aplikasinya di dunia pendidikan. This is about chapter 5. There is 3 substantial material. The first is we review the substantial body of work that addresses the need to link information from assessment to intervention in educational setting. The second is the focus, of course, is on dynamic assessment, approaches that have been designed and implemented for this purpose. And the third is use of dynamic procedures very much reflect the increased concern in education for assessment to inform instruction rather than lead primarily to generation of diagnostic label or classification for program eligibility. Jadi di sini ada 3 subbab yang akan kita bahas dari bab 5 mengenai bagaimana memberikan informasi dari sebuah assessment di dalam setting pendidikan. Yang keduanya kita akan melihat bagaimana dynamic assessment dapat didesain dan akhirnya dapat diimplementasikan dengan tujuannya. Dan selanjutnya untuk meningkatkan kepedulian di dalam pendidikan, dan assessment ini akan melihat generalisasi dari program yang akan dituju. More and more, the core one here is for realistic ideas for reaching these desired states, and these ideas should reflect database evidence. However, one cannot rely solely on research conducted with large groups for the supporting data. Group research can generate useful hypotheses and set direction for program planning, but does not accurately target the needs of resources of individual students. Teachers and parents want to know what works specifically for their children, and dynamic assessment provides a basic for generating this information. This is the difference about Vygotsky and Piaget concept. Vygotsky have zone of proximal development or ZPD more relevant than in education. And Piaget this concept is who was primarily concerned with describing and explaining development. In contrast to Piaget, who was primarily concerned with describing and explaining development, Vygotsky has interested in deriving implication for educational practice, particularly in relation to individuals with disabilities. From his point of view, intervention was not only critical to revealing cause, but also was an important and necessary outcome for promoting development. The outcome of the assessment should refer both the nature of individual functioning and nature of the intervention that facilitate development. Vygotsky viewed determination of zone of proximal development in specific domain as a relevant basic for instructional grouping, in contrast to IQ, which he viewed as insufficiently descriptive. Jadi Vygotsky dan Piaget ini mempunyai 2 konsep yang berbeda, di mana Vygotsky memiliki ZPD yang difokuskan dalam pembelajaran, sedangkan Piaget menjelaskan dan mengembangkan bagaimana pola pengembangan dari anak tersebut, lebih ke prosesnya. In Vygotsky concept, what differentiates of ZPD from the concept of instructional level? It is not merely task-focused instruction, that needs to take place with the GPD, but rather interaction that promote higher mental functioning. Karpov. Indeed, this interaction can become part of the development process itself. The second is that the purpose of assessment should be the identification of maturing function. From his point of view, the need for dynamic assessment become obvious. And the last, it is in this interactive context that the emerging function become evident and their characteristic available for description and intervention. Ini adalah konsep dari Vygotsky. Dijelaskan bagaimana membuat level-level instruksional yang difokuskan mengenai apa dan bagaimana tempat dalam ZPD ini. Dan akhirnya dipromosikan untuk atau diharapkan dapat meningkatkan fungsi mental dengan sangat tinggi. Pengembangan ini atau proses pengembangan diutamakan oleh pribadi itu sendiri. Okay, next, consideration of dynamic assessment applied in educational setting highlight the crucial issue of the relationship between the mediator and the learner. We must pay attention to characteristics that promote good mediation as well as characteristics that describe good learning reciprocity. Let's say, has operationalized both mediator and learner variables into rating scale with form that can be photocopied and applied in the dynamic assessment process. The scales attempt to provide some quantification of the qualitative factor that describe both mediation and reciprocity. Jadi di sini akan mengembangkan mengenai mediasi dan reciprocity berdasarkan jumlah kuantitasnya untuk menghasilkan faktor secara kualitatif. Bagaimana melakukan assessment ini? Our response of this question, all professionals who are involved in the education and the diagnostic intervention of the learner. From our point of view, no one owns assessment in general or dynamic assessment in particular. All professionals who deliver a service need to be able to conduct a competent assessment that informs the delivery. We can take this approach because dynamic assessment is not aligned with any particular content domain. Dynamic assessment concerns how the assessment is conducted. What is assessed. Jadi di sini setiap pengajar atau setiap guru itu membutuhkan yang namanya assessment yang akan menginformasikan segala hal, baik itu domain yang akan dituju ataupun yang lain. Di sini tidak ada assessment untuk dirinya sendiri, tapi ini lebih keseluruhan. Jadi dynamic assessment ini akan ruang lingkupnya lebih menyeluruh, tidak untuk perbagian. Education address learning process, and this process should be matched with the first is a process-based assessment approach for true authenticity, and the second for validity. Without this match, the assessment information reflect what Vygotsky referred to as yesterday, the zone of actual development. When, as professionals concerned with learning, we should be concerned about and plan for tomorrow, the zone of proximal development. This story is critical for understanding but an incomplete basis for planning. Dalam proses pembelajaran, dalam pendidikan, ini ada dua hal yang harus disinkronkan. Yang pertama adalah proses yang berdasarkan pencapaian penilaian dengan penilaian autentik, dan yang kedua harus secara valid. Ketika ini berhasil di-matchkan, maka akan menghasilkan sesuatu yang akan maksimal yang akan nantinya disebut dengan the zone of proximal development. Example, application DA in education in 3 example. In reading, an application in mathematics, and the other in speaking. I want to focus in application in mathematics because I'm from mathematics. Application in reading, students are observed during reading comprehension group regarding their abilities to summarize, formulate questions, clarify inconsistencies, and predict what will happen next. The teacher initially models their skills, increasingly releasing the role of group leader to the student, and during this process, the teacher continues to model and provides feedback and prompt to enhance the student's development of competence. The difference between product and process, Meltzers say, work in the area of learning strategies over evidence of difference between product and process in learning. Meltzer placed her model on the continuum between dynamic and curriculum-based procedure and adds observation of problem-solving strategies to evaluation the student with learning problem. From this information derives both guided observation of the student's approach to solving basic curriculum tests and active probes during the course of the assessment. Meltzer authored 2 measures, the survey of problem-solving skills and survey of educational skills. The latter assess reading, writing, spelling, and mathematics. Meltzer research is demonstrate that students with learning disabilities show less flexibility in their use of strategies than do successful learners, and cognitive inflexibility interact with lack of automatization. This is a mathematics application to mathematics. Campion and Brown say are well known for their research involves a highly structured approach to DA called graduate program. Although developed with more generic process-based tasks, they also applied this in the domain of mathematics, using either human beings or computers or as mediators. The graduate prompt procedure relies on careful test analysis and provision of predetermined hints that progress in their degree of explicitness in response to the failure of the student to solve the problem. The metric for this research is the number of hints required from the student to reach the criterion of the problem solved independently. An example in mathematics case, during the non-standardized intervention segment, the assessor offer help and support in response to the student's perceived cognitive, social, and emotional needs. The intervention portion requires no more than about a half hour per student. Warren described the math plan, a diagnostic and prescriptive test collection, a trip to toy store developed by a balanced assessment in mathematics program at Harvard University for use with students in elementary school. Jadi di sini ada yang namanya rencana untuk melatih siswa, dibiarkan pergi ke toko mainan dan di sana akan dilihat bagaimana penilaian keseimbangan mengenai matematik yang disebut dengan math plan. This is a set of multi-step real-life problem with 6 graduated tests for each the 11 section, totaling 44 tasks. The content includes mathematical objects, number or quantity, shape, space, pattern, function, change, and data, and action. About modeling, manipulating, transforming, inferring, drawing conclusion, and communicating. Teachers select a task and administer this assessment. Each action is scored with a rubric of no credit, partial credit, full credit, scaffolding apply, no credit, or didn't administer. The teacher receives training for the procedure during which they learn the specific of scaffolding, reliability and validity studies and process. Jadi di sini nanti akan dilihat bagaimana reliable dan validitas dari pembelajaran dalam prosesnya. Ada beberapa bidang matematika yang akan digunakan mengenai angka-angka, bentuk, ruang, pola, fungsi, dan data-data. Begitu juga dengan aksi-aksi seperti bagaimana memodelkan, memanipulasi, mentransformasi, mengubah atau membuat sebuah kesimpulan, dan bagaimana mengkomunikasi matematik. The next, in application in mathematics, as mentioned previously, the domain-specific work described by Tising-Hammers and Van Wit involve mathematics as well as reading and spelling. To assess this domain, they devise the prerequisites for arithmetic tests. This procedure consists of arithmetic language. This is a basic concept. Jadi penilaian terhadap tes aritmatika. Atau prosedur ini berisi tentang bahasa aritmatika. One-to-one correspondence, classification of picturing, sharing one characteristic, seriation, placing picture of object in order, conservation, comparing two rows of objects following transformation of one of them, and understanding of measurement of length and counting. Completion of counting row using cardinal number from various forward and backward starting point. Also, Hitendra and Kamenui demonstrate that the ability of their dynamic assessment of math procedure to differentiate between novice and expert among their third-grade participants. These researches also show the usefulness of their procedure as a research tool for comparing the effectiveness of teaching strategies in the content domain of mathematics. Jadi ini juga bisa berlaku untuk menggunakan bagaimana guru membuat strategi dalam domain matematik. Di sini ada beberapa yang harus dilakukan, bagaimana menempatkan gambar dalam objek, konservasi, membandingkan dua hal yang berbeda, dan selanjutnya. This is an example. The research about Jensen and mind ladder approach. Jensen developed his mind ladder approach that links mental processing with virtually all areas of academic achievement through a sophisticated about computer program. Individuals who know the student will complete a learning guide rating scale that generates a profile of the student as a learner. They examine, administer, selected a dynamic assessment in processing areas related to need identified from a compilation of information from the learning guide. Based on both source of information, learning guide and DA, the examiner can then link the finding with education strategies relevant to subsequent instruction of the student. This is a good example of an empirical means of selecting areas for targeted DA and further intervention. The other application, the result documented of the effectiveness of the videotape feedback to the teacher in improving the quality of the interaction as assessed by LEADS, mediating learning experience rating scale, as well as the relationship between this interaction and both of the responsiveness of the children. also measured. List response to mediation, scale, and their mastery of tests. Asman described his process-based instruction (PBI), which is teacher deliver to focus on the development of strategic behavior during the course of problem solving. The teacher works with peers. Dynamic mastermind in games. This is an example using dynamic assessment in mathematics. Dynamic master game also tests metacognitive skills, in this case with individuals with mild mental retardation. And the last, this is a conclusion in chapter 5. In his summary chapter that follows the presentation of a large number of DA approaches from an international perspective. Eliot emphasized that continuing need for the progress in linking the work of psychologists and teachers to develop and use procedures that inform instruction and intervention. The second, one of the greatest challenges of this work is to identify treatments that are effective for a large number of children and to document. Meskipun DA mempunyai keefektifan untuk masing-masing. One of the most exciting development in the generation of evidence. Further along, however, this development should be applied to every domain, and there remains much room for both research regarding what has already been developed and for design of new procedures to match the diversities of both task and learner. The last conclusion for the effectiveness of treatment is the use of function MRI, which promises to create one of the most powerful diagnostic tools for the 21st century. Jadi di sini, kesimpulannya, DA ini memberikan perspektif secara internasional dalam jumlah yang besar bagaimana progres untuk bekerja secara psikologi dan dari sisi pengajar untuk mengembangkan bagaimana prosedur yang menginformasikan segala sesuatu yang akan mereka gunakan dalam sebuah tes. Selanjutnya, challenge-nya adalah bagaimana mengidentify treatment yang efektif untuk beberapa anak dalam jumlah yang besar, sehingga dynamic assessment ini akan efektif untuk individual. Selanjutnya, setiap penelitian atau setiap uji ini akan mengembangkan setiap domain, walaupun lebih baik prosedur ini lebih terfokus dalam domain yang akan dituju. Jadi tidak semuanya bisa disamaratakan, tergantung domain yang akan digunakan. Sehingga ada beberapa contoh yang bisa digunakan untuk melihat efektivitasnya, yaitu menggunakan MRI. Ini adalah alat yang sangat powerful untuk mendiagnosis apa yang akan kita tuju di dalam abad 21 ini. Terima kasih pemaparan dari saya. Thank you for watching my channel. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih. Sampai jumpa.